Have you ever stopped to think about your fork? It sits quietly on your table every day, helping you eat pasta, salad, meat, and almost every meal you enjoy. It feels so ordinary, so common. It's practically invisible. But what if I told you that the fork was once controversial, mocked, and even considered sinful? Some people believed it was an insult to God, while others called it an unnecessary luxury. It's hard to imagine, right? So how did this simple utensil go from being rejected by society to becoming one of the most important tools in human history? Well, today we're digging into the surprising and scandalous history of the fork. Let's travel back in time, long before forks existed. For thousands of years, humans ate with their hands, knives, and spoons. Our hands were the main tools for eating. Knives were used to cut large pieces of meat, and spoons were perfect for soups and liquids. Eating with your hands wasn't considered rude or uncivilized at all. It was completely normal. In fact, good manners meant washing your hands before meals, and sharing food by hand was an important part of social life. The very idea of using a separate tool just to stab food and bring it to your mouth seemed strange, and frankly, a bit unnecessary. Now, you might be thinking, when did the first forks show up? The earliest fork-like tools appeared around 2400 BCE in ancient civilizations like Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Greece. But here's the catch: these weren't for eating. They were large, two-pronged tools used in kitchens to cook, serve meat, or hold food over an open flame. Think of them as ancient barbecue forks. The Romans also used similar tools, but again, only for preparing food. When it came to actually eating, the Romans still preferred their hands, knives, and spoons. The fork had not yet earned its place at the dining table. It was strictly a backstage tool, far from the spotlight of the main meal. The fork story takes a dramatic and almost unbelievable turn in the 11th century. It all started with a royal wedding. A Byzantine princess married a Venetian nobleman, and during a grand wedding banquet, she did something that shocked everyone. Instead of eating with her hands like the other guests, she used a small, personal gold fork. The guests were stunned, but the real outrage came from the religious leaders. They believed that God had given humans fingers to eat with, and using an artificial tool like a fork was seen as arrogant, unnatural, and deeply sinful. Some even whispered that the fork was a tool of the devil himself. The story gets even darker. When the princess later became ill and died, many people blamed the fork, calling her death a divine punishment for her vanity. Because of this incident, the fork was rejected across much of Europe for hundreds of years. It was seen as a symbol of decadence and defiance against God. While most of Europe resisted the fork, one country slowly began to embrace it: Italy. By the 14th and 15th centuries, a new food was becoming incredibly popular in Italian cuisine, and if you've ever tried to eat spaghetti with your hands, you know it's a messy business. Pasta was difficult to eat with just hands and knives. The fork, it turned out, was the perfect solution. It made eating pasta cleaner, easier, and much more elegant. Italian forks from this era were slim, had two prongs, and featured long handles specifically designed for twirling noodles. Among the Italian nobility, the fork began to gain acceptance as a practical tool, but elsewhere in Europe, it was still viewed with deep suspicion and treated as a bizarre foreign novelty. Italy was ahead of the curve, but the rest of the continent needed more convincing. So, how did the fork finally conquer Europe? It wasn't because of practicality, but because of fashion. In the 16th century, an influential Italian noblewoman, Caterine de' Medici, married into the French royal family. She didn't just bring her political influence to France, she brought her entire culture. This included her Italian chefs, her elegant dining customs, and, you guessed it, her forks. The French court was fascinated. Suddenly, using a fork wasn't just about eating, it was a statement. It showed that you were educated, fashionable, and part of high society. Using a fork became a symbol of wealth and refinement. At this time, forks were often made of precious materials like silver or gold, and were used almost exclusively by the upper class. The fork had become a status symbol, a way to show off your sophistication at the dinner table. However, these early forks weren't perfect. Most of them had only two straight prongs, which worked well for spearing chunks of meat, but not so well for other foods. Soft or slippery foods, like peas or small pieces of vegetables, would often fall right off. The design needed an upgrade. By the 18th century, a brilliant innovation appeared: the four-pronged fork. This new curved design could not only spear food but also scoop it, holding everything more securely. It proved to be simple, effective, and timeless. In fact, the four-pronged fork we use today is almost identical to the design that became popular back then. It was the perfect blend of form and function. The fork's final step toward world domination came during the Industrial Revolution. New manufacturing techniques made it possible to mass-produce forks quickly and affordably. Suddenly, forks weren't just for royalty and the wealthy anymore. They were made from less expensive materials like steel and could be found in middle-class and working-class homes all across Europe and America. With this widespread adoption came a new set of rules. Etiquette books began to appear, teaching people the correct way to hold a fork, which fork to use, for which course, and how to place it properly on the table when you were finished eating. The fork had officially become a social standard, a key part of modern dining. Today, if you look in a silverware drawer, you'll see an incredible variety. There are dinner forks, salad forks, dessert forks, and even specialized seafood forks. Different cultures use forks in different ways, sometimes paired with knives, sometimes with spoons, or even alongside chopsticks. But despite centuries of technological advancement, the basic design of the fork has barely changed. It remains a simple, elegant tool that survived rejection, fear, and misunderstanding to earn its place on our tables. So, the next time you sit down for a meal and pick up your fork, take a moment to appreciate it. Remember that this humble utensil was once feared, mocked, and condemned. Now, it's one of the most essential and universal tools in our daily lives. It's a small reminder that even the most ordinary objects can have an extraordinary history. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about the secret histories of everyday objects, make sure to hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which object you'd like me to explore next. Thanks for watching.